So good afternoon everyone. My name is Maurya Hanspal, and in this session we're going to continue our discussion on IPOs. So in the previous session we tried to understand what do we mean by an initial public offering. We also talked about the two types of scenarios. The one scenario in which a profit-making companies get listed, and in the other scenario in which a loss-making company get listed. So in the profit-making company, the 50% goes towards the QIBs, 35% goes towards the RIIs, and the remaining 15% goes to HNIs. Whereas in case of a loss-making company, 70% of the book is allocated towards your QIBs, and the remaining 30%, that is 15% each, is contributed to the RIIs and the HNIs. And we also try to understand the draft red herring prospectus. So in this session, we're going to talk about the different types of prospectus, and if time permits, we'll also be talking about the different types of IPOs as well. Okay. So SEBI has defined like four types of prospectus basically. The first is your draft red herring prospectus, or simply let's say it as a red herring prospectus. Red herring prospectus. So this prospectus of the company includes everything, in fact, everything from A to Z, starting from the financial statements of the companies, which further involve your income statement or the profit and loss statement, balance sheet or the position statement, cash flow statement, statement of equities, notes to account, all the CSR activities of the company, all the ESG norms of the company, all the kinds of activities, initiatives, investments, or projections that the company is making for future. The management discussion and analysis, the details about the management of the companies, all these things are mentioned. Key financial ratios, except your number of shares, except your number of shares and the price. So this kind of prospectus, which we popularly called as a red herring prospectus, it includes everything about the company except the number of shares which are being coming up in the market by the company and the price at which the shares will be issued or given to the shareholders. Okay. Now you might wonder, okay, key like when we apply for the IPO, so like 1 week or 2 weeks back, we have all the details, right? That how much the company is raising and what expecting shares the company is like releasing in the market, and how much is the offer for sale, or how much are the new shares coming in the market, or what is the pricing of shares. So that we call it as a final prospectus. Like when SEBI has approved your red herring prospectus or the draft red herring prospectus. So once it is issued by SEBI, so then we have the final details being published in the market. Okay. The second kind of prospectus is called your deemed prospectus. Though deemed prospectus is not talked about much and there is no much difference also. So deemed prospectus is a prospectus which is not a complete prospectus or an exact prospectus, but it is equivalent to a prospectus or deemed to be a prospectus because it is being regulated by SEBI or under the any governing act. Okay. So do not worry about the deemed prospectus as of now. One of the most important prospectus that comes in is the abridged prospectus. Abridged prospectus. So when we talk about the prospectus in general, the prospectus can be a very long statement, right? The prospectus, it can be a very long statement. It can include a large number of details. Okay, it can include the details starting from everything about the company, as I told in the case of the red herring prospectus. And the prospectus in case of some large companies, it can be up to 500 pages or 400 pages and all. And it is quite difficult for an ideal investor or a layman investor to read everything. And also that person may not have time as well to read all the pages, that is 500 and 600 pages in one go, right? So what happens in the case of an abridged prospectus, it helps you to give you a summary of the whole prospectus. That is, rather than reading all the 600 pages and the 500 pages, you can read the average prospectus as a summary. That is, that 600 pages will be like summarized into 100 pages or 50 pages, or sometimes even 10 to 20 pages. Okay, so that ultimately saves your time. So we can say that an abridged prospectus is a summarized version of the main prospectus, and it saves the investor time to read to the all the prospects of the company if he does not have time. So that is the case of an abridged prospectus. Then you have a shelf prospectus. So when we talk about the shelf prospectus, it is like, for example, if the company wants to issue the shares in the market, the company would be coming up with an initial public offering. Okay. So this is basically the case of a primary market. This is basically the case of a primary market in which your IPO comes into place. And what do I mean by the primary market? In which the securities or the shares are being issued for the first time in the market. Okay, so for the first time, the money comes to the company because ultimately we are purchasing shares from the company. And after that, the money does not come to public because the shares are being traded in the secondary market. The buying and selling of shares, it takes place in the secondary market. So first time the money is coming to the company, but in the second time when the shares are traded in the secondary market, the money does not come to company because ultimately the shares are being exchanged with the people around. Okay. So if the company wants to have some more rounds of share listing in the primary market, that we call it as the FPO. We call it as a follow-up public offer. Follow-up public offer. FPOs. So initial public offering is when the company lists its share on the stock exchange in the primary market for the first time, right? But if the company wants to come up with more shares in the market, okay, so obviously the company cannot just put that liquidity into the secondary market at one go because in the secondary market the company is not trading, right? The company is not trading in the secondary market. Buyers and shares are trading in the secondary market. So the company will have to come in the primary market once again and list its share once again. So that we call up as a follow-up public offer. Now again, the one thing that you need to keep in mind. In case of an IPO, sometimes the company have to wait for 6 months, 9 months, and even like 1 year also, because the SEBI proceedings and the SEBI procedures can be long. They have to verify each and everything. So just tell me one thing, if the company needs some urgent cash, will that company wait for again 9 months or 6 months for the follow up public offer? No, it cannot wait. In that case, the company comes up with the shelf prospectus. So what does the shelf prospectus means? If the company wants to more than uh, issue the shares more than once in the market, the company will come up with the shelf prospectus and it can issue the shares for max to max like 4 times in one particular year. So in that case, if after the one IPO, the company wants to list some more shares in the market, it won't have to take permission from SEBI. Like it will just have to mention SEBI that I'm coming up with the follow a public offer. And there would be no waiting for 6 months, 9 months, or 1 year. Okay. So a shelf prospectus, it allows you to have multiple issues within the same calendar year. And that can be up to max. मतलब ये एक हो गया. इसके अलावा प्लस 3 इश्यूज और ला सकती है कंपनी एंड उसके लिए कोई सेबी का जो भी मतलब कि लॉन्ग प्रोसीजर्स हैं उसकी नीड नहीं होगी. So that we call it as a shelf prospectus. Okay, so these are the four major types of prospectus being talked about in the market: the red herring prospectus, the deemed prospectus, abridged prospectus, and shelf prospectus. So when we talk about the red herring prospectus, it includes everything about the company, each and everything from A to Z, excluding the number of shares offered in the market and the price at which the company is offering these shares. And at the later time, when the people get to know the number of shares, the issue price, the offer for sale, and all that thing, so that we call it as a final prospectus of the company. The second one we talked about the deemed prospectus. So it is a prospectus which is not a prospectus in reality, but associated to be a prospectus or deemed to be a prospectus because it covers all the things as the main prospectus. Then abridged prospectus was a summary version of the whole prospectus because the main prospectus can be of 600 pages or 500 pages and an ideal investor might not have time to look in or go through all the 600 pages or 500 pages of the main prospectus. In that case, they come with the abridged prospectus, which is a summary version of the main prospectus. So the investor basically can read into like 10 pages or like 20 pages ka summary mil jayegi. Then you have the shelf prospectus. So in case of the shelf prospectus, if a company wants to come up with multiple issues in one calendar year and does not want to go through the hassles or the painless mechanism of SEBI because it takes considerable time to take permission from SEBI and pay all those expenses and charges and all like one after the other. So in a shelf prospectus, a company can list its share like more than once in the market in the primary market. Okay, so that's what we try to talk about. And we also talked about the difference between the primary market because ultimately when a company is coming up with its IPO, the shares are being listed in the primary market because the first money comes to public, and when the trading is being done, it's being done in the secondary market.